Hello, and welcome to Chapter 3 of our 5-chapter program, which I've called Brilliant Customer Service, because nothing less than brilliant will do. I'm Tony Hunt. In the last chapter, I asked you to think about the way in which you deal face-to-face with customers and clients. In this section, I'd like to think about the other communication systems that we operate. In particular, the way in which we handle the telephone in our transactions and the way in which we write our email, because both of these very, very important methods of communication allow us to develop further the quality of the work that we are doing. And if we can be brilliantly focused on the best possible telephone techniques, and if our email and physical correspondence can be of an absolutely high standard, we will win. With regard to the telephone, it's important to bear in mind that 85% of the message will come in the tone of voice. And so, for example, if you use a script to answer the telephone, can you train yourself and train those people around you to answer that telephone with that script, but in an original way? Not in a way that says you've already done this 50 times already. Thank you for calling the best hotel in the world. My name is Tony. How can I help you? And as soon as you do that, our heart sinks. What I'd like you to think about doing, even if you answer 100 incoming calls every day, the true professional answers each call with enthusiasm, as if this is the first call that you have ever received, and that you can warm to your customer simply by speaking that script as if it were absolutely natural. When we make a connection, there are a number of things that we ought to think about doing. This, I hope, will become second nature to you as you practice it. First, you focus your mind. Don't lift the receiver. Don't take the call until your mind has been focused. Try to answer within 3 to 4 rings if you possibly can. Give your name so that people know to whom they are speaking. Ask for their name so you know to whom you are speaking, and make a note of what their name is so you don't forget it halfway through the telephone call. Try during the course of the initial part of the conversation to look to be able to offer some kind of action. After all, that is why your customer has phoned you. And smile. We can hear a smile. We know if you're smiling. We also know if you're frowning. As a professional telephone talker, you will then warm the customers who speak to you. If you have to put them on hold, some thoughts for you here. Even though you've placed somebody on hold, you still own the call. It is still your responsibility. Therefore, try to meet the caller's need. If I have to put you on hold, perhaps I need to do some thinking first. Before transferring, can I suggest you listen for any emotion that there might be? Because if there is a very, very unhappy person at the end of the telephone line, putting them on hold and having them listen to some random music may well make them very angry indeed. You might want to reconsider how you handle that. Perhaps it'd be polite to ask the caller if he or she is prepared to wait. This is all before we think about placing the caller on hold. So, there are some alternatives to putting a person on hold that you might wish to consider. Let us imagine that you suspect that this person is very unhappy and that putting them on hold is just going to anger them. There are 7 alternatives here that you might want to consider. Are you prepared to wait, madam, while I find the person concerned? Could I put you to her voicemail? Would you like us to call you back later? Could I return your call as soon as I get some further information? Could I give out my colleague's email address so that you could contact him or her directly? Would you like to speak to somebody else? Could I help you in this? Each of these is a possibility that does not involve having to put that individual on hold. But if you have to, there is a protocol that I'd like you to think about following. The first is to ask periodically if they are happy to wait. Many telephone systems will beep to remind you that you have a caller on hold, but I would like you to think about going back to the caller and ask, are you still happy to wait? Because they may elect to choose a different option. And do remember, you still own that call. Sometimes you have to handle unhappy or difficult conversations, and in order to do that, I recommend that you think about simply being the perfect professional. It might be a good idea to change your seating position when dealing with a difficult call, sit up straight, maybe even stand, because your body is wired to your feelings, and if you feel galvanized into action, your body will underpin that and make you feel better about yourself. When dealing with difficult conversations, concentrate on listening for what is said, but equally try to listen for what is not being said, any kind of undercurrent, anything that is happening below the surface. Can you think, when you're listening to the caller, of any trigger words or phrases, particular phrases that seem to strike a chord, negative or positive? And are you listening for those emotional responses to cues that you give? Certain questions, certain statements attract a particular kind of emotional response. We're listening for the feeling here, and that sometimes helps us to move to a conclusion. Of course, it's not what you say, it's the way that you say it. 85% of a difficult conversation is communicated through tone of voice. I don't like your tone. And when that accusation comes your way, I don't like your tone, be courteous. Be absolutely professional. Do not allow yourself to escalate this call in any way at all. Attempt to establish a relationship by using empathetic words and phrases. And very importantly, avoid the temptation, avoid your own reactive behaviors. With one exception. Imagine a set of circumstances where you are speaking to a customer who becomes aggressive and offensive, and that same customer starts to use what you consider to be inappropriate, unacceptable language, maybe even obscenity or swearing words. Can I suggest that you take a very assertive approach here, and you simply say to that individual, if you use that language again, I have to tell you that I'm going to hang up this call. And I would like you to continue with the call, and if that customer uses that inappropriate language again, simply put down the telephone. Please do not warn the customer. If you continue, I'm warning you, because it's almost as if you are complicit in the abuse then. So to be strong about this, after all, you own this call. If you decide that that language is entirely inappropriate, you have absolutely every right to give one warning and then put down the telephone. However, I'm sure that most difficult callers are not going to behave in that kind of way, and this is a wonderful opportunity for you to show you're professional. Show how professional you are by clarifying their issue, confirming that you understand it. Let them know that you will own this matter if you possibly can. They love to hear you say things like, I will make sure, I will take charge of this. Then offer them some choices. And by doing that, make a true connection between somebody who has an issue and somebody, you, who can resolve that issue. A couple of additional tips when transferring a call to a colleague. Pay attention to your caller's attitude. But don't transfer the emotion, because quite what often happens is that you, at the first line of attack, as it were, will get an angry caller shouting at you. When you transfer that to another person, don't transfer the emotion with it, because that person may be entirely different in the way in which he or she speaks to the next person. So don't transfer the emotion. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Imagine a set of circumstances where you have answered the phone to a very, very angry caller who then says, put me through to your manager, put me through. I'm not standing for this. I'm so angry. I want to speak to your manager. And you put that person through to the manager. You know, the chances are that that individual won't continue in this angry mode. He or she will modify their language because they're now talking to a manager. So don't transfer the emotion. And very importantly, please, do not take any of this personally. Don't behave angry or offended. It is not you they're being angry with. It is your role that has dissatisfied them. And you are strong enough to be able to take this. We make promises. We all make promises. And if you have made a promise on the telephone, keep it. There is a principle that you may wish to operate, and I think it is well worth doing. It's called under promise, over deliver. If it's going to take me an hour to resolve your issue, I will tell you it's going to take me 2 hours to resolve the issue. And if I resolve it in an hour, I'm going to get back to you, and that's a win. If I get back to you in an hour and 5 minutes, if I've promised to get back to you in 1 hour and it's an hour and 5 minutes before I get back to you, I haven't kept my promise. So, under promise, over deliver, rather than over promise and under deliver. When making a promise, do what you said you would do. Quite simple. Call back with updates if necessary so that your customer knows this is what you're doing, and ensure that your customer is satisfied by calling back and asking, have I completed this task to your complete satisfaction? And if not, start again, because that's what we're there for. If you have to leave a message with a customer or an internal customer, some suggestions here that will help reduce confusion. Mention their name so they know the message is for them, and your name so they know it's from you. State the purpose of the message. Clearly state the main points of the message. Request any action that is needed and indicate the best way of reaching you. And if you use that as a template, your messages will be taken and understood and responded to as appropriate. Some telephone tips to make sure that you get the right message across. May I ask who's calling is really quite important. Put me through to your boss. He knows who I am. May I ask who's calling? I need to know your name and the nature of your business, would be your response. And giving too much information away is not such a good idea. So think about things like she's away from her desk. May I, instead of she's gone out shopping. She's away from her desk. May I take a message? He's out of the office until tomorrow. She's out of the office for the next 2 weeks. I don't want you to say she's gone to Lisbon for her holidays. That's too much information. She's out of the office. She's not available. May I help? May I take a message? Another major form of communication, other than the telephone, of course, has become email. Email is a vitally important part of the way we do business. It's the most frequently used form of communication. However, it's low on the list of preferred means of communication. And for that reason, I think we've got to be quite careful about how we use email, especially in a kind of relationship build with our customers. I know we email shot people regularly. I know we send lots of emails out in order to do our marketing. I understand that entirely. However, if I try to conduct a relationship with you via email, it may well fail because it's low on the list of preferred means of communication for most people. The hierarchy is this. At the very top of it, people prefer face-to-face communication. I want to be able to see you. And if I can't see you one-to-one, I'd like to be in a meeting where I can discuss things with you. The third choice is for me to watch a presentation live when you can outline what it is you propose for me. And if I can't do that, a video conference where I can perhaps see a presentation or participate in a meeting. The telephone comes next on the list of preferences, where I can telephone and talk with you. But remember, 85% of that message now is coming in tone of voice, not in any visual aspect. And a teleconference might be next on my list because at least I can hear and therefore I can draw some kind of emotional connection from your tone of voice. Next on the list is email. It's way down there because email says a lot, but it doesn't connect with me in any kind of emotional way. And if I'm your customer and I get an email, I hope that that is only part of what you're trying to communicate to me. Because email does not do things like humor, irony, angry. We can't manage good customer relationships through email only. We can use it in an entirely professional way. But for example, writing an angry response to a customer in an email is simply stupidity. I am angry today, so I'll write an angry email and I'll even put it in capital letters. That shows how angry I am. Well, you won't be angry tomorrow. But your email is going to be angry for the rest of time, isn't it? And not only that, that email that you've sent out is not just going to be read by the recipient. It's going to be read by a journalist. It's going to be read by a lawyer. It's going to be read by a boss. We've got to be really, really careful that we professionalize our email correspondence so that it enhances our service rather than diminishes it. So, correct spelling, grammar, capitalization, and punctuation are vitally important. And if you can't do that, check with somebody who can. Involve yourself in peer proofreading so that a colleague can look at anything that goes to a third party that is generated from you, and you will do the same for that person. Because one single error in an email says everything about your company that that customer wants to know. So we should be error-free. We need to use templates which have a corporate identity. We don't want to choose randomly the font, the size of print, the color of the ink. We want to give some kind of corporate identity. I'd like you to use email as a follow-up to a previous conversation and restating matters agreed in other media. Absolutely fine to use that, but let's make sure that there is a consistency in every email that we send out. Some tips for getting your emails right. Use a good subject heading. Retain the message thread so that you can follow through the transaction. Write correctly, I mean grammatically correctly, with correct punctuation, capitalization, and so on. Try to focus the information in your email into the first paragraph and keep the length of almost all emails that you send out to the length of one page maximum. Try not to justify down both edges of the page because you get disproportionate spacing in the middle of the sentences. Ragged right-hand side is what most people like to see as they're reading. Use an agreed house style and do not, repeat, not, try to express emotion through email because it will only hurt you. Email does not do emotion. And you may well find yourself being very, very angry in the email that you send, but tomorrow you're not going to be angry. But that email is now going to be read by a lawyer or a journalist or your boss. And it will turn out at some point later on down the chain to be an entirely embarrassing and absolutely inappropriate piece of writing that you've done. So no emotion in your email. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in our next chapter.